welcome, Joe Cairney. And Joe is the lead singer of the UK progressive rock band, actually two of them, Comedy of Errors and Grand Tour. He's from Glasgow, Scotland, and he was also a watch commander for the Strathclyde. Did I say that right? I hope.
Yeah.
Fire and Rescue.
Yeah.
And so the guy really gives it his all to not only save people, but then provide great music and help make them feel good. So let's go ahead and we're going to talk about both bands and potentially both new albums if there are. I know Comedy of Errors is, but Comedy of Errors started in 1984. So by the way, happy 38th birthday. I guess it was actually January when you got started. And then you reformed the band in 2011. Just real quick, was the name chosen from the famous Shakespeare play, or is there another place of origin?
It was, and hello and welcome, Mark. Thanks very much for inviting me. Yes, the actual name came from the Shakespeare play, which was called The Comedy of Errors. Jim, who is the keyboard player and writes all the music, lyrics, he was a big Shakespeare fan. So he thought it was a good name. So it's quite a nice name. It's a wee bit different. Most people don't know where the name came from. They just think it was a name thought up. But unless you know Shakespeare's books and his plays, then you wouldn't know where the name came from.
Well, you started in what a lot of people call the neo-prog days.
Yeah.
Some fantastic bands: Marillion, IQ, Palace, Collage, Satellite, Sylvan, Frost, 12th Night, and then of course Pendragon. What was it like during that era, being with those bands? And
it was kind of different. We'd done gigs with Palace, we'd done gigs with IQ, Pendragon, Solstice, and quite a few other in the 80s, where they played a place in Scotland called the Heathery Bar, which was the equivalent to the Marquee in London. That's how good a venue it was. Now, a lot of big bands played this, the Heathery Bar. So we got to support some of the bands. Pendragon, IQ had been on the go for a couple of years, and we were lucky enough to get support. We've basically we still kind of were in contact with Palace at the moment. We were actually meant to be in Europe last year, but obviously because of COVID, the 6 gigs or so were cancelled. So fingers crossed they'll go ahead later this year. But getting back to the 80s, the bands back then, I absolutely loved. I mean, I loved IQ, Pendragon, because I didn't really know what these guys were like. Same with Palace, Marillion. Marillion, when they came to Scotland, they used to support Palace. When Palace played down in England, they supported Marillion. So with Derek Dick, who's Fish, he doesn't like to be called Derek. He likes to be called Fish.
Yeah,
I used to drink with the guy. I went to lots and lots of gigs, and I got to know him pretty well. Really nice guy, really down to earth. But as with most progressive bands, they were all really, really nice. They all wanted to help each other. Very, very few. I don't think I could actually say that I played with a band that I didn't like the guys and I didn't like the band. You might not always like their music, but these guys were always good. And most of the bands we played with played the same type of music, and we got on really, really well with them. And these guys, most of them are a lot bigger than our band, and they're a lot better known, sold a lot more records. But we like to think that we're still kind of at the same level as them without saying that we're better. We've got a slightly different style from Pendragon, IQ. But I mean, IQ, I love IQ. I love Peter Nichols' voice. I like Michael Holmes' guitar. I think and I've met them a few times. And Rob Aubrey, who does their albums, mixes their albums. He does IQ, and he used to do Spock Speared, and he obviously does Big Train. He does our albums as well. So I've got a lot of respect, because the guy's not going to actually ask you to mix your albums unless he thinks your music's good enough to do it. So we're really pleased the sound that it gets, and the sound he's got on the new album is really good, really good. Well, 80s, I think we went back. I remember one year we did about 123 gigs. I've still got a list of the gigs we did, which was absolutely mental. I mean, that's like doing a world tour, but in the UK. So you're playing literally either Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
Wow.
Again, you were going to some places and you're playing to 10 people because you're unknown. But we kind of built up a following, like most bands when they start out. You've got to build up a kind of rapport, and then hopefully people will then talk to other people. So when we first played in Europe, which was 1987, I think it was, we played the Paradiso, which is a really famous venue in Amsterdam. And we had a massive crowd there. And there was no internet, there was no mobile phones. It was literally word of mouth and through fanzines that fans had done, because we were surprised. How would them know us in Europe? You've never heard this. But that was a big thing for us back then, 1987, to play to a really nice crowd, big crowd, and we were unknown. So that was good.
But just a real quick story about Fish. My brother and I went to a Colorado concert, and I was kind of a bold guy. I said, I saw this door open and it looked like the band. So I opened it, and my brother's like, "Don't go in there, we're going to get thrown in jail." And I went anyway. And he was right there at the front of the door, Fish. And he goes, "Yeah, come on in, get in here." So we both, I went in, my brother was really nervous. He didn't want to do it. And this was after the show. And it sat down and we talked with them for a while, and they gave us autographs, things like that. It was just amazing. And
he's a nice guy.
I think this was the Misplaced Childhood tour. Yeah,
right.
And they were huge, Kayleigh and all that. I mean, it was massive. I was like, this guy's not going to talk to us. I mean, he's going to get the hell out of here. But no, they were really down to earth.
He's really, I find he's really, really down to earth. And I said, I don't think I've met anyone that I've played with. When we played in Germany, the festival in Germany, Yes were the main band. And I kind of went because I knew Yes were coming on last. So I was speaking to Trevor Rabin, Rick Wakeman, then John Anderson came down. So I wanted to speak to John Anderson. So he's got a minder with him that doesn't like you to stop. So John Anderson said, "No, stop. I want to talk." So I actually chatted for him for just a couple of minutes. And I went to take a photograph, and my battery in my phone had died. Oh. So his minder ushered him onto stage. But I spoke to him after it. But such a nice guy, because they're massive. They sold millions of records, but they still took the time to stop and talk to, possibly because I had the thing around that I was playing in another band. So maybe they felt, right, I can talk to him because he plays in another band. But he never knew me. Rick Wakeman didn't know me. Trevor Rabin didn't know me. But the fact that they took time to talk to us and let us take photographs, that made a lot of thing for me, because I said a lot of people, when you talk about bands, people think that they're so big, they forget that the fans and people that are in other bands like them, buy their records. But I don't think I've ever met anyone in the progressive bands that I've never had any and never showed us anything but respect. And it's maybe just the type of music, the type of bands. I'm pretty sure you'll get the odd one. Steve Hackett, probably the nicest guy you'll ever meet.
Very nice.
He will talk to you.
Yeah.
No, and he doesn't say, "Oh, you need to go. I need to talk." You can sit and talk to him for 5 or 10 minutes, and he will make time for you. He's such a nice guy. Probably the most down to earth guy that I've ever met live. Really nice guy.
Yeah, I don't know if he's still doing the after gig things because.
Oh, he's still doing. Yeah, he still does them. Yeah, he still meets the fans. When they came to Glasgow last year, yeah, he done the after gig thing where he came out and he spoke to the fans. He doesn't do it. He doesn't do it to the extent that he used to do it. Yeah. When I saw him in Glasgow before he started doing Genesis Revisited, he played a place in Glasgow called the Ferry, which is literally a ferry on the River Clyde, and he used to get 150 to 200 people. That was all he got showing up at his show. But I was a massive fan of him, loved his guitar. And then as soon as he started doing the Genesis back stuff and playing all the records from when he was with Genesis, it then took off. So he's playing to 4,000-5,000 people.
Yeah.
So he had to then kind of, obviously, I can't talk to 4,000 and 5,000 people. Even if there's 100 people want to talk to him, he couldn't do it. So he kind of cut it down. He still does it, but not to the extent he did before he actually did the Genesis thing, which is a shame because he's got a lot of really nice records on his own. His
solo stuff, is
brilliant.
Just real quick on him. I happened to go on the GTR tour, if you remember GTR.
Oh, brilliant GTR, yeah.
And he and Steve Howe came out and talked with out of nowhere. I think I was buying some posters or something. And the two of them came out and they said a few things. And then they said, "Do you guys have any questions?" There's like, I don't know, 50, 60 people there. It's like, yeah, we all do. But I mean, it was amazing that they, were willing to sit there and take the questions and that after, performing they both, they did a lot of Yes, they did a lot of Genesis as well as their entire record. And it's like, aren't you tired from all that, but you're willing to do this. That was really nice. And then just a real quick story about Jen Anderson. This is even faster. I went to an Orlando show and the place wasn't that full. And so this was his solo tour. And he came out, he goes, "I want all of you people to get down here in the front row and we're gonna do requests." And I'm like, John Anderson is gonna, there's gonna be thousands of yes. Anyway, what a guy. Yeah, very nice guy.
He's a really very humble guy, very humble. And I said that was the first time I'd spoke to him when he played with Yes years and years ago. I got into the back of the Apollo in Glasgow, which was probably the Apollo in Glasgow was probably the best venue in the world at the time. Every single band wanted to play the Glasgow Apollo. It had a massive stage, which was about 20 feet off the ground.
Wow.
But it had 3 tiers. It had the kind of stalls, and then it had an upper level, and then it had an upper level again. And every single band wanted to play the Glasgow Apollo. Believe it or not, the last rock band to play the Glasgow Apollo was Uriah Heep, and Palace supported them. That was the last rock band to play before they pulled it down. But
that's a shame.
It was an absolute. It actually went downhill. They didn't spend the money to keep the uptake, but when money talks, big builders come in and they want to flatten the place and build a cinema complex. So money talks, and at the time the Apollo was still selling out. So any bands that played the Apollo, you could get. I saw Black Sabbath 3 times. I saw the first band I saw there was Mott the Hoople.
Oh yeah,
and the support band was an unknown band called Queen. That was and I
Yeah.
thought Queen, that was
Isn't
the
that
first
something?
time I had never seen Queen before. And I was just blown away. And then I
Oh, yeah.
went to see Sparks, you know, the band Sparks.
Yeah, yeah, I've heard.
I'm actually going to see them in a couple of months in Glasgow. I love Sparks. Totally
Weren't
different.
weren't they 80s or 90s, I think?
They actually started 70s.
Oh, okay.
They've got 26 albums.
Oh, yes.
They started 19 very early, but probably 1971. But before their first kind of big hit single was "This Town Ain't Big Enough." That was 1974, I think. And then, but they were never a big hit band. For some reason, they stayed kind of in the background. But now they're like a cult band. So whenever they play, they sell out everywhere they play, because so many bands have come out and stated that they take Sparks as an influence. Even Queen admitted they took Sparks as one of their influences, because they'd done the multi-layered voices, the high voices. But really good band. So I'm going to see them in Glasgow two or 3 months' time, I think.
Yep. Hopefully nothing delays anything, because
Really, fingers
we
crossed.
need to get back to where we were. Everyone.
Yeah.
There's thousands of bands just chomping at the bit to.
You want to get, I mean, I think we were meant to play when we played in Canada. I think it was 2017. I think it was 2017. And I think we were meant to play this year, but because it was cancelled last year, the bands for last year have been put on this year. So maybe we'll get to play it next year. And the same with Rozfest, the guy that ran Rozfest. Yeah, George that ran Rozfest, right? I actually only found out a couple of months ago that he's given it over to John Blangero.
Yep.
Right. So John Blangero was instrumental in getting my band on Rozfest. He pushed to get our band over there. So he now runs it. So fingers crossed that the ties that I think the hassle from getting European bands to the States is the visas take an awful lot of time up, and it costs a lot of money. The great thing about it was they really looked after as well. George, I met him the night we arrived. They took me down, they fed me, gave me drink, and then we had a couple of parties we played on the Sunday night. And every single, I can't believe the fans, probably the greatest, you'll never see fans like. I couldn't believe the queue that was climbed up to, because I was actually saying the band that was the last band, let's tell, I can't think of the name of it. The last band that was on, kind of big American band. They were more a rock band, I thought, than a progressive band. And they'd actually started, and we still had people, we're still signing autographs. And Lisa Wetton, John Wetton's wife, no, Lisa.
Oh, yeah.
So I spoke to Lisa, and Lisa had said, Joey says, I've been coming to Rozfest for years. As had a couple of other people I met. He says, we've never seen a queue as big as the one for yourself. And I'm going, there's bigger bands than that. He said, I swear to God, Joe, we've never seen a queue to come up and meet a band than we, and that really made our day. And the fans were absolutely fantastic. So I'd love to go over and play down in Tampa, because that's the biggest in Tampa now.
It's a beautiful place. We used to live.
Yeah, I've been to Tampa. I've been to Tampa a couple of times. Lovely place.
It is, definitely. All right. So just the reformation of Commoneers, what was it that drew you back to them? Because thank God you did, because you've made some great albums since. But what was it that you got everyone back together again? I know you probably have wanted to make new music and had written new music, but what was the impetus that got everyone back together? Because it's always a question with bands. They break up and then some never get back together again. So what's your secret? What is it that helped get you guys back together? And hopefully we can Get
Can you understand me okay? Can you understand me okay, or am I talking too fast?
No, I completely understand.
Right. What happened was when I joined the fire service in 1989, I had to leave the band because I had to do 16 weeks training, and I thought it was unfair on the band. So they kind of agreed. They actually were, I think they were basically going to kick me out anyway, but they kind of agreed. So they got another guy, a guy called John Cowden, and I went to see them, I think, twice between 1989 and 1990, possibly 91. But they changed from being a progressive band. They tried to become like a rock band. So they started playing cover versions. They did Sensational Alex Harvey's band, Mott the Hoople, a couple of other bands. And they stopped doing the kind of progressive stuff that we'd done. And then they just kind of basically died. They just stopped playing. So in 2009, Jim contacted me out the blue. Pendragon were playing in Glasgow at the venue, the Ferry, which is a ferry on the River Clyde.
Yeah.
Do you fancy meeting up, Joe? I've got some stuff that we did back in the 80s. I'd love to do it again, but redo it now with the technology we had. This is 2009. So I met Jim and his wife, and I can't remember if Mark was there, but we sat actually chatting at the gig, and I felt really terrible because people was telling us to shut up, listen to the band. So we had to actually really apologise because I hadn't seen Jim for years and years. So we went outside, we spoke, and he gave me his ideas and said that Mark Spalding, the guitarist, was interested in doing it as well. So between 2009, 2011, we recorded the Disobey album. We contacted Rob Aubrey, and Rob Aubrey listened to it and then went, yeah, he quite liked it. So, and then it was 2 years after that to Fanfare and Fantasy, 2 years after that to Spirit, and then 2 years after that to our last album. So it was every kind of 2 years it took us to do an album, but obviously with COVID, etc., it's kind of put us back. So it's when we bring out our next album, it's going to be, that'll be literally 4 years, which is it's kind of on it. But it's just because we couldn't get into the studios, the record companies couldn't do the CDs. And there's a problem with CD Baby as well. Just now, CD Baby have went every single artist worldwide that uses CD Baby to sell CDs, and they do the downloads for Amazon, etc. Unless you've got this new tax code, they're refusing point blank. So we've not had any money from CD Baby for probably over a year. So we can't do anything until April this year, because the tax year starts in April in the UK, and it's only then we can then start our new album, because the company that does our CDs won't take the money just now and defer it till April. So it means we'd be in a different tax year. So it's kind of a wee bit of it's not a major problem, but it's a bit of a problem. But it's not affecting just our band. This is every single band. So hopefully then we'll get it started in April, and it should be out for the end of May, June. That will be the new album, which is called Time Machine. But the follow-up album for that, which is called Therinody for a Dead Queen, it's a really weird name, but I've already recorded the first track, which is about 16 minutes long. So the follow-up album, again, I've recorded the first track. Bruce has already done all of the drums. So we're hoping to have that one finished by the end of summer and released November, December. So because it's been 4 years since our last album release, we're hoping to release 2 this year.
That is awesome.
Hopefully the fans will quite like the one that we're going to do, and then they'll buy the 2 albums. We'll wait and see. We'll see. But I'll get your address and all that off you, and I'll send you copies. What I'll do is, as normal, I think I'll send you the downloads first. So I'll send you the downloads, the links to the downloads, and then I'll send you the CD copies, just for you then to do a wee review of them yourself. So we'll sort that out.
Well, thank you very much. I'll do the review off of the downloads, but definitely I appreciate that. But well, you jumped ahead to the next question, which was okay.
Sorry.
So no, that's all right. So 2 albums hopefully by the end of the year, COVID permitting and all that. That is excellent. Yeah, really. 1 would be great, but 2 is spectacular. Can't wait.
The first one, the Time Machine, it's totally done, finished, recorded. It's been mixed and mastered by Rob. Had the CDs back of the master, the sound plus that we recorded in Rosefest.
Oh, okay. Your internet's kind of going in and out. I don't know if
so we're going to add that. We actually on just cut out there.
Yeah, it's back. Everything's good now, but it just kind of went in and out.
The Time Machine, we're going to put Disobey, which we actually put it on when Chris Topham had released our first album, and he asked us could he do it as a vinyl, and then we done Spirit, and then we done the last album after that, and then he said to us, can we go back to Disobey? He'd like to release it as a double. So at the end of the second side, we did Disobey live from Rosefest. So the only people that have got a copy of that is the ones that's got the vinyl, which is a limited edition. I think there was only 300 copies made. So we're going to put it on the CD so as that people can actually see it. So there's 5 tracks on it. I think it's about, with Disobey, I think it's maybe about 55 minutes. It's kind of like an old album style kind of length, rather than, I'd actually said to Jim, why don't we release it as a double album? But because the 2 album styles are totally different, Jim said, no, we'll release them as separate albums. So we'll see what happens.
What would you, how would you compare it to one of your albums of the past? Which album would it be similar to, or is it just completely new direction?
If I was going to say if it's anything like, it's probably more, it's like between Spirit, probably Spirit and my last album. I would think the style's kind of different. The only thing is, one of the tracks, the first track on the album, I think Jim's running of that, was a track called Wonderland, which is about 13 minutes long. Now, we had a track back in the 80s called Disneyland, but because the name Disneyland, we thought if we put this out as Disneyland, Disney have got a habit of coming after people who use them. So there's a wee short section that was in the original Disneyland that we've put into the track called Wonderland, and we've just changed it Disneyland to Wonderland, so as we've not got any hassle. The next track on it is when we'd done our first vinyl album back in 1985-86, the mini album, we had a track on it called Behold the Night, and I always try and push Jim, go back into the past, bring back some of the stuff that we did in the past, because most people that have never heard of the band until 2011 won't know this stuff. So he kind of rejigged a song that was called Behold the Night, and it's called The Night Returns. But the night as in like a night from the old ages, not like nighttime. So it's a night with a K. So it's kind of basically the same as the old track with an added 2-minute section 3/4 of the way through the song. So those two tracks are harking back to the 80s because of that kind of style. But the rest of the album, would say, is kind of between. There's the third track on it's called Lost Demigods, which is actually quite a tongue-in-cheek track, where Jim's lyrics are actually quite funny because he uses Shakespeare. He uses a lot of old people, Galileo. He uses a lot of names in the track because these guys are all lost. Because Jim's a kind of big historian, loves all these people that were big over history. So he's used a lot of their names in his lyrics, and it's actually quite a funny. It's a really nice track. Actually, I actually like it, but it's quite a tongue-in-cheek track. And then we've got an instrumental. The instrumental tracks, again, a little bit different. It's kind of quintessential. Jim's got a lot of stuff that we'd use back in the Renaissance period when he used the old harpsichord. So Jim brings a lot of that into the songs, and it's called the Past or Future Days. Just a really nice guitar work, nice. The only thing with this album is there's not any kind of big meandering guitar solos that Mark used to do in the other albums. There's not as many guitar solos, but it's just a kind of music. Jim does a lot of the solos on his keyboards on this album rather than use guitars.
Sounds good, boy. I want it. Looking forward to it. What about Grand Tour? Anything in the works for next year, or is that?
Grand Tour, believe it or not, we were meant to play a gig 2 years. They do this gig in Glasgow. It's called the Prague Before Christmas, that Abel Gans organise every year. So we played it a couple of years, and we're meant to play it probably 3 years ago. And 3 weeks before we were meant to play it, Hugh tripped over his neighbour's cat, broke his fingers. So we had to cancel it. So Comedy of Errors filled in. The following year, which was literally December, just before the lockdowns, COVID now hit, Bruce, the drummer, was in Sweden, and he was lying ill in his room for 2 days. He was with his company, and it was only last year I said to you probably had COVID, but it wasn't known then. You didn't, because he said he was absolutely dying. He was in a blacked out room. He said his bosses literally carried him onto the aircraft. So he said, sorry guys, I can't do the gig. So we had to cancel that one. So Christmas there, because the COVID restrictions in the UK, more so in Scotland, it's a lot stricter, were cancelled again. So we were meant to play it. So at the moment, I think it's the 26th of November this year. So Grand Tour should be playing a gig on the 26th of November. The new album is kind of getting there. Hughes admittedly said he's kind of gets behind a wee bit. He said it's because he's a wee bit older now. He'll come onto the keyboards, and he said he'll sit and record stuff, and then he won't do it for a week or two. So the album's kind of, I think, halfway done. I usually wait for Hugh to come up with the melody lines, and then I'll ask him what it's going to be about. So I've been trying to get him to do an album about 9/11. So because of my fire service experience, and I'd given him kind of a lot of lyrics about the very last guy down was a captain in the American Fire Service. I can't remember the guy's name, but he wrote a book called Last Man Down. So I'd said to Hugh, right, this will be the start of the album. The album's, I said, in the very last track, we'll just call it Last Man Down. We'll base it on whether it is, I don't know. It will be a concept album of such, but whether it goes to, I'd like it to be 9/11 because it means an awful lot to me because of the fire service, obviously, and obviously the police and the ambulance service that lost a lot of lives, and obviously the thousands of members of public, which was, it's still kind of holds a lot to me, means a lot.
Definitely. Well, let me ask you this then. Is there anything that I've missed that we haven't talked about that you'd like to mention?
But we're playing a gig. I've done some tracks for a band called Caribou, a German band. Oliver Hughes, Oliver Rusing, really nice guy. And he'd asked me his previous album to add some vocals. It wasn't a great deal, and he said to me for his last album, could you add some vocals? So not the Time Machine album for Comedy of Errors, the following album that we're going to do for that, I've said to Jim, can we ask Oliver to add some vocals? So Jim said absolutely no problem. So I'm going to get Oliver to do vocals for the next album, which hopefully will be out November and December. And the next Grand Tour album, I've asked Oliver if he can do some. So Oliver's absolutely no problem with it. So that's the kind of only side of it, that things that way. I've done stuff with Taylorgy, American band Taylorgy, Robert McClung. Band.
Oh, no kidding. From Georgia?
Yeah, I've done on his second album, I can't remember the name, that's terrible. It's about a witch. I can't remember the name of it. I had only a small, very small part on it, and it was a speaking part, because back in the day when the witches were all getting burned in Salem, etc., there was a lot of Scots over there. So he asked me to speak like I was a Scots jailer. So the girl that's the witches in the jail, and so I had a wee kind of talking part on it. But I had Robert do violins and guitar when I done the charity track, the mystery track, the Sailor and the Mermaid. So he done a lot of guitars and violin stuff, which was a fantastic musician, Robert. So I turned down quite.
That's good.
There is people that
you're a great band.
It's kind of now. I had to go onto social media and actually say to people, "Can you stop sending me music?" Because they wanted me to. Because I felt as if we ever came up with any songs that sounded similar, they would say, "Oh, I sent you that." So I had to diplomatically say, "Can you stop sending me music?" Asking me to, because I'm not an expert. Some people would send me stuff and it was really terrible. It was as if it was recorded in a room. But to be diplomatic, you would say to them, the drums are too loud, the vocals are too low, the keyboard. So you try to be diplomatic about it, rather, because you don't want to ever say to somebody that's terrible. But so now I still get the odd people will send me, can you do lyrics for this? Can you? I've got a band in Malta that I've done a couple of songs for, called Elder Water. And I actually done a song for them. They done the mix and they sent me the mix, and I wasn't happy with the mix. And Hugh from Grand Tour listened to it and said, "That's a terrible mix." So it was too much reverb, too much echo in my voice. So I asked them, going to redo it, take out the reverb, because I'd actually told them before it, the last song I did with you basically spoiled it by adding too much reverb. So they came back to me and said they would redo it, but I still haven't. That's about 4 or 5 months ago. So I haven't heard the mix yet. So I'm hoping that they're not annoyed, but if somebody releases something and I'm not happy, so I was trying to tell them the first one I did with you, the sound was terrible. I said, you spoiled your own song. So I try to say, so hopefully it will come out within the next month or two. And they said they were going to release it as a single. And my pal that stays in Sweden, who used to say in Malta, that's the Maltese man, he's done a video for it, but we're still waiting for them to do the final mix and mastering, and then hopefully they'll release that. Totally different. It's a rock song. It's not progressive, it's a rock song. But it's actually a nice song. The only thing I don't like is when a band sends you something, and they just send you the music, so they don't give you a melody line. So you've got to sit and try and work out. So I sat with Hugh, and Hugh'd worked out a melody line, which I didn't think fitted. So then I had to write the lyrics. I think I wrote the lyrics in about 30 minutes because I had an idea in my head, and then I just went against what Hugh did, went to Hugh's studio, we recorded the track, and it actually came out really, really well. And the lyrics actually were quite well. They're actually quite personal lyrics. I had to change the last 2 verses were actually, they were pretty dark. And when I read them and I said them to Hugh, I'd recorded them, I actually went back to Hugh's to re-record them because I thought they're a bit dark, and there's a couple of people would see the lyrics and they would know it's about them. So I went, well, I better change. So.
Well, hey, thank you very much for all your time and for creating such wonderful music. Hopefully this will be like a time capsule to sort of catch some of the history and most importantly, the future for you. You are definitely one of the best UK bands out there.
Thank you.
I'm glad you guys keep making music. And thanks again for
thank you again, Mark. I really appreciate it. So once the album's out, which it probably won't be out till June because of this thing with CD Baby. So as soon as I get a copy, I'll send you a copy, a file, send you, and then I'll send you a physical copy. Okay, so you've got the physical copy as well. So I appreciate your time as well, and we appreciate the support you give the bands as well. That's always appreciated. And a lot of bands, I think, when they come down, they don't actually appreciate that people actually promote their bands. They just think, oh, somebody will do it. But I appreciate the time that you've taken and the time that you've done to support our bands online. It makes a big, big, big difference to us, and it's appreciated.
Definitely. Well, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording, and then you and I can talk for a little bit. But hey, thank you again for doing this for Progressive Rock Central. I forgot to say that, progressiverockcentral.com. And I'll be posting all this shortly, and you can watch it, and hopefully everyone else out there will be watching too. All right, hold on just a second.